Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at something so absolutely central to our modern lives that we basically don't even question it anymore. Our complete and total obsession with achieving perfect well-being. Think about it. We are constantly downloading new apps, right? We're tracking our sleep, optimizing our diets, trying to engineer our social circles, and ironically, we're often stressing ourselves out just trying to get a perfect recovery score. And it's all for one goal, to eliminate pain and maximize happiness. We literally believe that if we just get the technology and the formulas right, we can build a utopia. But what if that whole pursuit is completely backwards? What if trying to hack our way out of suffering is exactly what's making us miserable? To unpack this trap, we are bringing in an absolute powerhouse guide today, the brilliant 19th century novelist and philosopher Fyodor Dostoevsky. He understood human psychology better than almost anyone, and I promise you, his warnings about our quest for a flawless life are more urgent today than they have ever been. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, the modern happiness delusion. Then, a life defined by tragedy. Next, the illusion of rationality, followed by the danger of pure reason. And finally, finding the beauty within the suffering. All right, section 1, the modern happiness delusion. We kind of live in this era that assumes human discontent is just a bug in the system. A technical error that we can just eventually patch out. The whole modern utopian dream relies on rationality, clean formulas, and relentless technological progress to build this flawless, pain-free existence. We essentially want to cut loose from the old spiritual anchors and rely purely on data to create perfect well-being. But Dostoevsky, he saw a vastly different reality. He viewed human nature not as some clean mathematical equation, but as something fundamentally driven by chaos, irrationality, and madness. He argued that the human mind is so hopelessly muddled and contradictory, it's just impossible to ever truly fit it into a sterile mechanical system. And that brings us to one of his most profound, foundational beliefs. Dostoevsky argued that suffering isn't a bug at all. It's actually infused in the blood. It is a fundamental tenet of being alive. Because of that, no matter how much social or material progress we make, we can never comprehensively eliminate suffering. All of our efforts to improve the world, our technological advancements, our biohacking, they merely change the specific things we derive our suffering from. We aren't curing the human condition. We are simply swapping our old problems for new and honestly often much more complex problems. Moving on to section 2, a life defined by tragedy. Now, Dostoevsky didn't just sit in a cozy armchair and dream up a grim philosophy just to be contrary. His insights were forged in the fires of unimaginable hardship. Just trace this timeline for a second. Born into relative comfort in Moscow in 1821, his life unraveled incredibly fast. In his teens, his mother died of tuberculosis, and shortly after, his father died under super mysterious circumstances. It was widely speculated he was actually murdered by his own serfs out of vengeance. Later on, after trying to make it as a writer and falling into complete financial ruin, he joined a radical group focused on utopian socialism. Well, this led to his arrest in 1849. And then comes the absolute defining moment of his life. He was sentenced to death by firing squad. On December 22nd, he literally stood there facing the barrel of a gun, counting his remaining life in mere minutes. But right as the officials steadied their aim, a pardon arrived. The whole thing had been a mock execution, a horribly cruel psychological tactic designed specifically to break the prisoners. 4. That is the number of years he was subsequently forced to spend in Siberia, surviving grueling labor in completely horrific conditions. When he finally returned in 1860, that young utopian socialist, he was completely gone. He was a deeply changed man, entirely stripped of his idealistic delusions about engineering some perfect society. His focus turned sharply inward, toward this incredibly deep spiritual and psychological exploration of what actually makes human beings tick. Which brings us to section 3, the illusion of rationality. Now, what's really interesting about this idea is how Dostoevsky channeled his newfound psychological depth into his masterpiece, Notes from Underground. He uses it to show exactly why our human irrationality will always inevitably sabotage a perfectly engineered system. He captures this with sheer irony through his narrator, who makes this brilliant observation about us. He says, "Shower upon him every earthly blessing. Drown him in a sea of happiness so that nothing but bubbles of bliss can be seen. Give him economic prosperity such that he should have nothing else to do but sleep, eat cakes, and busy himself with the continuation of his species." I mean, if we had all that, we think we'd be perfectly happy, right? But Dostoevsky says no way.
Out of sheer spite and ingratitude, humanity would inevitably play a nasty trick.
He goes on to argue that man would deliberately desire the most fatal rubbish, the absolute most uneconomical absurdity, simply in order to prove to himself that men still are men and not the keys of a piano. This is what's known as the famous piano key problem. Dostoevsky realized that we crave a sense of self-agency so desperately that if you actually put us in a perfect formulaic utopia where every single problem was solved for us, we would literally go mad. We would deliberately choose chaos, destruction, and suffering just to prove we aren't mere cogs in a machine. Let's break this down to our everyday reality. Think about your own tendencies for a second. We consciously tell ourselves we want perfect happiness and peace, right? Yet, look at our behaviors. When things are actually going completely fine, what do? We find things to complain about. We dwell on incredibly petty issues. We subconsciously sabotage perfectly good relationships or stable jobs. And why? Because our need for self-agency and our chaotic inner nature completely override our desire for a predictable mechanical utopia. We really don't know ourselves nearly as well as we think we do. Section 4. The danger of pure reason. So if we can't just follow a neat formula to be happy, what happens when we try to force the world to obey pure logic? In his novel Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky takes direct aim at the big philosophical enemies of his time, these ideologies that were rapidly replacing faith and spirituality. Specifically, he was warning against nihilism and rationalism. These are the beliefs that life basically has no inherent transcendent meaning, and therefore all of our actions and morality should be determined solely by cold logic, knowledge, and self-interest. Dostoevsky wanted to show us just how catastrophically destructive this gets when you mix it with our flawed human nature. He gives us the character Raskolnikov, who is a destitute former law student. Raskolnikov creates this terrifyingly rational equation. He decides to murder an abusive, wicked old pawnbroker. And under pure utilitarianism, his logic is kind of flawless. Murder this one terrible person, take her hoarded wealth, and use that money to fund good deeds, help his struggling family, and benefit the masses. In his mind, an extraordinary, ruthless man is absolutely allowed to commit a crime if it serves the common good. On paper, the cold utilitarian math works out perfectly. And this brilliantly illustrates the intense disconnect between our logical brains and our actual chaotic souls. Raskolnikov thought his totally rational plan made him a powerful, extraordinary man acting on pure reason. But the crushing reality was entirely different. After he actually commits the murder, he isn't empowered at all. He is completely broken. He finds himself totally tormented, riddled with immense pain, guilt, and horror. He discovers that he's actually a tender, feeling man, and he's ultimately driven to confess to the police just to stop himself from going insane. Reason alone was entirely incapable of navigating the moral universe. His conscious mind had rationalized the horrific act, but his true, complex psyche just couldn't bear the reality of the suffering he caused. Finally, Section 5. Beauty within the suffering. So, if suffering is unavoidable and trying to hack our way out of it through pure logic completely fails, what are we actually left with? Well, Dostoevsky offers a really profound answer in his novel The Idiot. A character named Prince Mishkin recounts a deeply personal anecdote about a man sentenced to a mock execution by firing squad, which is obviously a direct mirror of Dostoevsky's own traumatic experience. The man realizes he has exactly 5 minutes left to live, and he divides this precious time methodically. Step 1. 2 minutes to bid his comrades farewell. Step 2, 2 minutes to think about himself and the vast mystery of existence for the very last time. And step 3, just 1 single minute left to simply look around at the world. In that final minute, staring down the barrel of a gun, the man looks out and focuses on a nearby church. The top of the cathedral is this gilded dome, and it's shining brilliantly in the bright sun. Facing immediate certain death, the knowledge that he was about to lose absolutely everything forever made this simple, everyday image almost unbearably beautiful. The conscious awareness of the fleeting nature of life made the sheer beauty of existence so intense, so overwhelming, that the man actually felt immense anger. He literally wished they would just hurry up and shoot him rather than let him steep in the agony of knowing exactly what he was losing. He thought to himself, what if life were given back to me? What infinity? I'd reckon up every minute. I'd let nothing be wasted. So what does all this mean for us? The crucial takeaway is this. Yes, Dostoevsky firmly believed life is inherently tragic, and perfect formulaic goodness is impossible. But it is precisely this impermanence, and the very presence of suffering, that frames the breathtaking beauty of our lives.
When we obsessively try to use technology and rationality to build a sterile, pain-free utopia, we blind ourselves to the profound depth of the present moment. We try so hard to avoid the darkness that we literally forget how to appreciate the light shining off the dome. So, as you go about optimizing your life this week, I want to leave you with this question. If an obsessive pursuit of perfect happiness is actually robbing you of your profound human agency, what beautiful, fleeting moments are you missing right now while you're trying to engineer the pain away?